Huntington's disease, Todd here. Hey, I was thinking about it the other day, and sometimes people say, they got Huntington's disease in their 50s or 60s or whatever that may be. But, you don't actually get Huntington's disease. You are actually, you have it. It's in your DNA from birth. So I just want to qualify that a little bit by, maybe how we acted our whole lives or things that we've done. Maybe it goes back to the fact that Huntington's disease was there all along. So maybe if we look into that a little bit more, it'll help us, it'll help us live with it. It'll help our family live with it. And, maybe give us all, I don't know, a little bit more understanding and compassion towards the whole thing. So, if you're born with something in your bloodstream and you can't do anything about it, well, that's kind of what Huntington's disease is. It's born in our DNA. So it's who we are, right? It's who we are our whole lives. And then it's how we act, which I'm going to really focus on that a little bit. And then it's who we ultimately become. So, who we are is the blueprint of life, right? It's just how things are when you're born. You have blue eyes or you have brown hair or whatever that is. But also because of us, we get that very special opportunity to have the DNA of Huntington's, the expansion of that gene. So maybe it gives us a chance to reflect back on, how we acted when we were going through life. I'll give an example of that in a second. But I was thinking back, of who we are. I came from a very cool life. I had a mother and 4 brothers, so there was 5 of us in the house. I had a great grandfather and grandmother. I would say that our childhood, was pretty cool and we had a lot of fun. But, I noticed that every now and then my mother would snap at us or whatever. Obviously, when you got 5 kids, it can turn out that way. So you could snap at somebody or you could be that way. But so, and then my grandfather, I mentioned him a little bit when he first got Huntington's disease. He had an episode with it to the point where he snapped at one of my brothers, and then so it made him so angry at himself he didn't even want to. He was very unforgiving of himself because it was not like him. It was not his nature. But I say all that to say this, maybe some of the things that we've done along the way, are not necessarily indicative of who we wanted to be, but they were there buried into that whole Huntington's disease thing in our lives. I remember, so that's kind of like, who we are, and this is how we act. So what about when you're going through life and how you act, the person that you become? And I thought about the fact that, I have been, a pretty resourceful person my whole life. I wanted to graduate high school. I wanted to get my car. I wanted to work. I've done those kinds of things my whole life. But also along the way, I've had a few habits here and there. Maybe those habits were brought on a little bit by Huntington's. I'm not going to blame anything on Huntington's or take away from it. But I'm just going to say, as part of our DNA, part of us, who we are, it comes from the DNA, obviously, that we have. Maybe you were a very good student. Maybe you are, lived your whole life of being very, academically inclined. Maybe you are a hard worker. Maybe you never acted out, or you had a great life and all that. But, maybe there's a few things in your closet. I would say that one of the things that was in my closet is sometimes, maybe I would snap at the kids now and then when they were growing up. I wanted them to be this way or that. So sometimes I would, snap at them. So throughout our whole lives, it forms who we are. So I was thinking about someone that said, every time they look at a room, they feel like they need to clean it up or whatever. Well, that could be born into you too. And maybe that's, exaggerated, if you will, because we have Huntington's in our genes, have Huntington's in our DNA. Maybe there's things about us that we've done our whole lives. Some people might call them quirks. Some people might call them, your idiosyncrasies, but maybe they are brought, part of our nature is the fact that Huntington's disease was there too. Did Huntington's disease, make you more organized, or did Huntington's disease make you more of that kind of person that wanted to be, always on time, or always late? Or did it make you the person that had to have the tools in the right spot so you could find them, like me? You know, so who we are, and then how we act, and then ultimately who we become. So our whole lives was dictated by Huntington's disease in the back of our mind, in the back of our DNA, not necessarily even in the back of our mind, because sometimes we don't find out we have it until we get older. I found out when I was 52, and then I started having some of the symptoms in my mid 50s. So that is what we end up becoming. But is what we're becoming just a manifestation of what we've been our whole lives? And all I'm doing by saying all this is maybe as you look back on your life, or maybe if your kids look back on your life, they could see the whole thing of well, maybe my dad acted like that because of this. Maybe my mom acted that way because of Huntington's disease. I hear some stories of people who say, their loved ones can be ugly with them. And obviously it is the Huntington's that's making that happen. And again, it goes back to the fact that, this is a brain disease, and it's not something that the Huntington's person, can control. And it's, someone said a brain disease, not a heart disease. Our hearts are the same, and we want to still be, the loving person that we are. But again, Huntington's is in our DNA. It's been there the whole time. And it has made us who we have been our whole lives. At the end of our lives, though, sometimes people change a little bit. My mother was pretty gentle her whole life. She would snap us as kids, but she was very humble and meek in the very, last years of her life. My brother was that way too. My brother Tony, he had a very gentle spirit, and he lived his life like that. I think I've seen a lot of Huntington's patients who become a lot more loving and caring, or resigned as they get further down the road. So that's who we ultimately could become. But maybe it'll help all of us in thinking about the fact that this whole time the DNA has been a ticking little time bomb inside of us. Maybe it made us do and say and act certain ways our whole lives. And I'm not making excuses. I don't want that to be the case at all. But I am trying to give understanding. Events can happen in childhoods or in lives that can form the way you think. So it's, to me, I would say that Huntington's could change you, and how you live and how you think. So that's today's thing. Anyone watching this with family, loved ones, you might just want to think back about how your parents have been their whole lives, and if they've been good, bad, or indifferent, maybe you can reflect on the fact that maybe it's the Huntingtons and not them, of course, and maybe it'll give you some solace or something to look back on, so it's not so hard when things can turn ugly as this disease does what it does. So this Huntington's disease, Todd, and that's it for today. Come to my page and subscribe.